Hey, everybody, welcome into another edition of the Inside Nebraska podcast. He's Greg Smith, the senior recruiting analyst at Inside Nebraska. I'm Zack Carpenter, the publisher. And Greg, we're talking today, just wrapping up about the 2023 Huskers recruiting class, Matt Rule's first class as head coach, 21 signees. It's ranked number 27th overall in the country, number 4 in the Big Ten in the Rivals rankings. I think 3 4 stars, maybe 4 4 stars if I look at the chart. But the class is pretty much not totally wrapped up. I think we'll talk about that in a second, but pretty much wrapped up for the early signing period. What are your just overall thoughts on the class, or one storyline, I guess, that stands out?
Yeah, I think overall, I really like the makeup of this class. I think that Matt Rule and his staff did an exceptional job, in my opinion, of putting together kind of a good class on the fly in what 24 days was it since when they were hired to early signing period. And I think that the big storyline that caught my eye was that everyone comes in and says, "Hey, I want to go ahead and get in-state talent. I want to go ahead and lock that down right away." Right. Every coach says that when they get a job in a college program. Matt Rule actually walked that walk after talking about it, right? 8 in-state signees, a lot of linemen from in the state. And to be honest, the 8 in-state signees, they wanted more, right? And I think that that's something to me that's a part of this that I have to underscore. And I don't want to bring up raw feelings already of a couple of guys that they did not get, but Benny and Goy, the Lincoln High 3-star athlete that could play either side of the football in college, stuck with his pledge despite a late charge by Nebraska. He's going to Iowa State. And then the one that we had been kind of talking around this entire time was Zane Flores. And I think that we have to mention that because while he was not going to flip from Oklahoma State, that was not Matt Rule and his staff's fault, right? And Matt Rule definitely wanted Zane Flores in this class. I can give you a quick little side story that has not really been told, I don't think. Matt Rule considered going to Gretna's team banquet just to be seen at that thing so that he could show Zane Flores that he wanted him. But what happened was that Zane had already said that, hey, let's not do it. I'm going to stick with Oklahoma State. So that goes to show you how competitive Matt Rule is and how much it meant to him for real to keep guys home in state. But they got 8 guys from Nebraska signed up to play. And I really like the group that they got overall. When you start with a guy like Tristan Alvano, who I think is maybe the most impactful guy in this class, and it sounds crazy to say that about a kicker, but you guys watching this, listening to it, know that Nebraska and kickers, it's been a roller coaster over their last handful of years, and they've got some other really talented players coming in from in-state. So I really like what they did in the state of Nebraska, including keeping the number 1 player in the state, of course, at home, Malachi Coleman, after his brief flirtation with Coach Prime in Colorado.
Yeah, you mentioned, talking about in-state recruiting and the locking up the talent in state, and 8 signees is the most that Nebraska has brought into a single recruiting class in over 20 years. They signed 10 players from the state in 2002, and 5 times since then, they've signed 5 players from in-state, but never more than 5. So 8 winds up being the most that they've signed in state, which is pretty astounding to me when I was looking at the rankings, trying to find when's the last time they had at least 6 when Jalen Lloyd, prior to his commitment. And I just kept scrolling back and scrolling back and scrolling back. Am I going to find one? And then 2002 is actually the start of the Rivals era, is the first time that we have rankings. And that was the very last one that I got to, was when I found the 10 in-state players. I'm like, wow, that was pretty shocking. But like you said, they have all those now locked up, and 8 is also the number of commits from the previous staff who were already committed, who wound up still signing with this class. In terms of, there was 8 of them. Malachi Coleman would have been 9th, but he decommitted and then recommitted on signing day. So those 8 guys, obviously they did the work to keep them, not only keep them, but clearly they see that they're valuable. And like Matt Rule said yesterday at the signing day presser, everyone on this team, which includes the recruiting class now, are my guys. He's excited to work with them. And if we're talking about geographical stuff, I know I keep talking about this, maybe sort of beating a dead horse or beating a narrative storyline into the ground. And that's the geographical recruiting, because I think it's so fascinating. Like that, the bigger picture of recruiting, the strategies, like that's what excites me the most. And
Mm,
we're seeing, I think after that first 4 or 5 day window where we see all these offers that are coming from in either a 23 or 24 class, um, things started to sort of piece together. And then now that it's been 3 weeks, it's becoming quite clear the type of player that this new staff is going after, the really fast, raw but athletic. The tangibles are there, and now you just have to develop it and sort of harness it, and where it's all coming from. I mean, Texas, Philadelphia, the East Coast,
mm.
some from Georgia and Florida, the DMV area, the Washington, D.C., Maryland, Virginia area, which I've keep harping on is just loaded with talent, such a small radius. And in the time
Right.
of the recruiting calendar, you can go out and see 20, 30 kids from a dozen high schools. I mean, more than that, I'm probably lowballing it, but we're seeing offers come from there now. Signings come from that general area. And like Matt Rule yesterday talked about Texas, about how they're going to hammer it every class. But then the other storyline that we were just talking about today, actually,
Yeah.
is something I forgot about. I mean, we talk about the 1 year bump that each coach gets, right? Uh,
Right.
how that first class, like you can start rolling momentum. Kind of forgot about how it can roll into momentum for the 24 class of guys locking up their spots or taking a closer look at Nebraska. I think we're starting to see some of that now too, right?
Yeah, we definitely are, and it's funny because I've already got two future cast in for 24 guys. Aaron Hampton, a 4-star athlete, I think the 33rd best player in the nation, down in Texas, and then also Ian Flint, a 4-star tight end out of Texas as well. Already those guys I think are trending in the right direction for Nebraska. There will be more. I think the 24 class, and I think I tweeted this out yesterday, is that with all this momentum, I think that the 24 class could be special for Nebraska. And the wild card, as always, and someone will eventually say this, is whether or not Nebraska performs on the field, right? Like, just what does that look like in year one to be able to kind of hold guys over and make sure that they're going to want to kind of stick with it through that first year. But I think that the momentum will be real for Nebraska for the 2024 recruiting class.
Yeah, and obviously the golden goose in that class is quarterback Dylan Raiola, which
Yeah. I was going to let you go ahead and throw that out there.
I was gonna say for the SEO purposes, we just say Dylan Raiola so we can pump up the views on this. But it's kind of the same thing with Malachi Coleman in the 23 class. Sort of need to prove it on the field, even though Nebraska didn't really necessarily prove it on the field and
Right.
in 2022. But I think there are other reasons definitely other reasons for why Malachi decided to lock in his signature with Rule and the new staff. But he's a guy who most likely he's gonna start a receiver, and then he has potential, I guess, to move to different positions or be used at different positions. He said that yesterday with our rivals Clint Cosgrove, that he could be used at I think 7 different positions by Rule and the new staff. But he's one guy that obviously is going to get a lot of attention. But just on offense, who's like one guy to you that stands out the most, whether it's under the radar, or just a guy that you really want to spotlight?
Yeah, Quentin Ives, the running back from New Jersey, is a guy that I've kind of had my eye on since he came onto the radar for Nebraska. When you first started to hear about this 6'3", 6'4" athlete in New Jersey that had 1,600 rushing yards and over 25 touchdowns as a senior, that gets your attention, right? And you wonder, like, is he going to be a wideout? Like, with that being that tall, usually you don't see running backs that tall. But running back is the spot, and I know that running backs coach EJ Barthel is really excited about him. He talked about that kind of on the Nebraska football recruiting show that they did yesterday for signing day, and about how athletic he is and playing basketball and all of that. I think he'll be a really interesting kid to watch, and I think that running back too. And the reason that I kind of always like talking running backs in these things too, because running backs pop early, right? Like, you tend to know fairly early whether or not a running back is going to be good. We saw, and right after we saw with AJ Allen this past year, and so that's a thing where you could pop early if you're Quentin Ives and get into the program, and find yourself a spot. Whether that doesn't necessarily mean he's a starter, but he works his way into the rotation. And he plays him on special teams as well. So I really like Quentin Ives and what he can do, kind of long term.
Yeah, and then for me on offense, I'm looking at Bryce Turner, the receiver from Texas, the first official commitment for Rule and the staff on December 6th, like pretty much right after offering him. Um, and if I'm pairing them together, it'd be him and Jalen Lloyd, who I'm kind of most excited about. Both similar stature. I mean, Jalen Lloyd, 6'1", 160. Bryce Turner, I think 6'2", 165, 160 range. But what I'm really excited about, and hopefully I can like kind of contain all of this, like what I want to say about him, why is just, I mean, that electric speed, we saw it on the field with Trey
Right.
Palmer, with how impactful he was in the offense. And if you're getting a speed guy like that, whether it's from the slot or on the outside, I think that opens up your offense tremendously. And with the offensive line, I mean, we have to wait and see how guys develop. But if we're just looking, like, for instance, if you put Bryce Turner on this last year's team and with this 2022 offensive line, and if they adjusted with the offensive line to where we're not going to run all these slower developing plays and downfield passing, if we're just looking to do short intermediate passes and get our guys in space, give them the ball quickly, which I get the sense Marcus Satterfield might be pushing to do in his first season as offensive coordinator.
Mhm.
If you have a guy like Bryce Turner with that speed who can turn on the jets really quickly, like, I think that also opens up another weapon, another dynamic in the passing game, the short passing game, to get guys in space like that. And same thing with Jalen Lloyd. It's just that raw ability for both of those guys. And then if, like we said, Dylan Raiola or whatever quarterbacks they're going to be targeting going forward, they're going to want to see, all right, what playmakers are you surrounding me with? And
Oh yeah.
get a guy like a Bryce Turner or Jalen Lloyd developed and show, hey, we have guys where you can unleash that arm that can throw it
Mhm.
60, 70 yards down the field. So I think that's also impactful. But on the defensive side, there's I mean, they brought in a bunch of guys, and I think the most recent signee was Vincent Carroll Jackson, Syracuse defensive tackle commit, and a lot of exciting things that could be coming his way or from him, and the production we could see from him. But on defense, who's one guy that stands out the most to you?
Yeah, it's man, we're talking about speed, and I feel like that has been kind of the underlying theme of this video so far. And I'm gonna go with somebody that definitely has that on defense, and that's Eric Fields, the linebacker out of Oklahoma. He was a late ad. He has been mysteriously like his recruitment has been really interesting. We'll have more on that coming later, like maybe the weekend or early next week. But I want because I want to dig into that a little bit more. He was very under recruited. Was it Arkansas State, the other school that he took an official visit to in just a couple of weeks ago? He gets the offer from Nebraska, comes on an official visit like the next day, and then he's basically locked up from there. I can actually, the statute of limitations is up on this, so I can actually say this. So when Zach already knows this. So I called him, and we're kind of checking around, kind of seeing like, hey, when are you thinking about announcing your commitment? Like, who is it down between, those sorts of things? And I called Eric Fields and I asked him that. He told me he was going to announce on signing day at like 1 o'clock. And I go, well, who are you picking between? He laughs. And he goes, Nebraska. I'm like, okay, well, I guess we're going
That
down.
settles it.
Yeah, that settles it. So
Great.
like that recruitment was just such a whirlwind. He's a kid that is a really fast kid, has verified track times. He had 180 total tackles as a senior. Like, he's just a really, really good football player. And I know that his film was kind of bouncing around on our insiders board over at Nebraska.rivals.com. And, people that watched that film saw a hitter, right? Like, that's a kid that wants to strike people. And I know that he had said some things kind of after his official visit about, kind of being an old school football player that likes to hit people. His dad's a former professional boxer. Like, I really like him. I think that he's a kid that you could see very early in his career at Nebraska.
Yeah, it's impossible not to spotlight this class without talking about Eric Fields because
Yeah.
reasons. Matt Rule, he didn't really shower that many prospects with praise yesterday during the press conference, but he kind of went out of his way, right, to talk about Eric Fields and said,
Yep.
I don't want to make any promises, but everyone here is going to know who he is. Big, fast, physical. I think that's a guy that they might be. I mean, he's one of the guys that they're most excited about, to put it safely.
Yeah.
Steve Marek, our resident film expert at Inside Nebraska. If he gets excited about a player, then you're gonna know it has even more merit. He called him a heat
Right.
missile. I mean, 200 pounds and really fast for his speed. I mean, I know some of the people on our insiders board we're talking about the track times not being that fast, but if you're combining the physicality, the physical nature of Eric Fields, then it certainly is fast.
And the fact that he's 6'3", 200 pounds.
Yeah, exactly.
That too.
But in addition to Fields, another guy from sort of the same geographical area, Prince Will Umanyalan, defensive end out of Manor, Texas. Again, indicative of the Texas spotlight, Texas focus when looking at the different footprints they're going to be looking at. But you said it best when you talked about him before, just potential cornerstone pass rusher. Is that like that long, that perimeter pass rusher who they've been able to use as in a stand-up role too, down in Manor. So that's another guy that needs to be talked about a little bit more in this space. I think there are a lot of people who are really excited about him.
Oh yeah.
I think he's the other than Malachi, he might be the highest ranked or second, third highest, whatever. He's in that top 3-4 range of highest ranked signees in this class. But Principal is definitely a potential impact guy down the road.
Yeah, he's the third. I just looked on our site. He's the third highest rated guy that they have.
So that's another 4-star.
There you go.
4 stars, and they're trying to. I mean, I think it's clear that they're not going to care. The staff isn't going to care about star rankings and
No.
things of that sort.
But Rule actually didn't he say? Did he say it yesterday? And he talked a lot yesterday, a lot of different places, including with rivals Adam Gorney. Did he said that there will be guys that you've never heard of that they'll recruit and they'll offer because they don't care if they're not on the radar. But by the time they sign, there'll be guys with high recruiting rankings.
Yeah, he said the quote was, "I don't care who we offer," but he was saying it in the context of, "I don't care if like no one else is looking at him." But if you look at just the quote written down, "I don't care who we offer," I just started laughing at that yesterday. Like, oh, all right, well, they're just gonna be tossing him around. But no, the context.
Yeah, they've offered me as a quarterback.
Yeah, right. The long snapper Zack Carpenter over here, to add to Marco Ortiz, the Florida long snap transfer, who was part of 6 transfer additions that those guys don't count to the 2023 recruiting class necessarily, but an extra 6 guys with 3 Florida transfers, Marco Ortiz, 3 Florida transfers, Jeff Sims, quarterback, Georgia Tech, Baylor running back / receiver, Josh Fleeks, and Texas A&M defensive end, Elijah Judy, who felt like he maybe jumped the gun. Obviously, I think he was kind of playing the social media game of, I'm going to announce on Christmas Eve, and then I'm gonna announce at 3:30, and then boom, he drops it 1:00, which is when we were anticipating Eric Fields to
yes.
I was like, oh, all right, let's jump on this. And then 30-40 minutes later it was Fields, and then another 30 minutes or so later it was Vincent Carroll Jackson. But another strong transfer group. Looks like a really good foundational class for Rule's first class. But I mean, going forward in this group and beyond, what's one more thing that you're looking for as we wrap up the early period and move on into the new year?
Yeah, I think the one big thing for this class is to see if they can land another big time offensive lineman. I think that to me, and I know it feels like, I was having this discussion on the board earlier today. I'm like, man, people are like, how many linemen do they need? Well, they've got, basically at this point, all of your in-state guys. So Gunnar Gatula, Sam Sledge, and Brock Knutson, they're all scheduled to play on the offensive line. And then Jason Machachak from South Dakota, our boy Jason M, will also be. It's an inside joke for those of you that don't know that.
It's just one time to show people the classified.
The classified Slack documents. Jason is
like, we don't feel like typing out the entire last name for Princewell Umanyalan or Jason Chachak, so we just say Jason M and Princewell.
That is definitely correct. But he's scheduled to be a guard. Mason Goldman, another one of those in-state guys. He could be offensive defensive lineman. He's scheduled to start on the defensive line. So they've got 4 guys in the class of 2023 that are scheduled to start off on the offensive line. I think they still will bring in one more at least. And I think the guy that they really want is, I'm going to butcher this name, Chimdi Onwa, out of Maryland, who Donovan Raiola did go and visit during the early signing period. He's got a great story. Like, he was committed to Old Dominion and was not rated, and he's now shot up to either a high 3-star or a 4-star on some services. He was going to potentially sign with Rutgers during the early signing period. I'm just going to call my shot and say that ain't happening. He picked up Nebraska. He picked up Penn State. He's going to get other offers as well as we go through. Seeing what happens with him and maybe another offensive lineman are the things that is the thing that I'm really looking forward to down the stretch here.
You say he's from Maryland?
Yeah.
There we go. That's
There
another,
it is.
every time I hear it from the DMV, I start getting a little more excited. Like, all right,
That area is going to be just it's such a huge thing. Like, I think that, like, you feel like you're beating a dead horse. I feel like we're just holding up the sign to people to be able to say, be prepared for what's coming here, because there's going to, there's been so many offers out that way on the East Coast, right, that have happened. And a lot of them happened yesterday for the 24 class, and people didn't quite notice it because it was signing day, and we'll have to circle back to it. But Nebraska will definitely be out there on the East Coast pounding the pavement hard. They have too many connections within the staff not to.
Yeah, when I first came over here from the Ohio State beat, I was excited. I'm like looking around at recruiting areas and like offers and everything. And one of the first things I looked at was the DMV area, because it was one of the last things I had worked on was after that East Coast swing that I did covering South Carolina as well. And I was coming out of that. I didn't realize it until I made that East Coast that swing of how much talent there is in that area. Same thing with St. Louis, where it's similar. So many high schools that are loaded with talent in such a small radius, where it makes too much sense to not target those areas. And if they have these heavy, strong East Coast connections, then it's an area that, like we've been saying, they're going to be circling and with a big red marker going forward in the 2024 class. And like you said, potentially the 23 class, but almost wrapped up. Maybe a couple more news items or surprises even coming down the pike here before the February 1st National Signing Day, which used to be signing day and now is just National Signing Day 2.0, I guess that we call it. So
the secondary one.
Right, exactly. So 21 signees, again, ranked 27th overall for now, 4th in the Big Ten, which is incredible that they made that jump from outside the top 50 and staying at number 12 in the Big Ten all the way up to fighting for the 7th top 25 class in the last 8 years and all but guaranteed a top 5 spot in the Big Ten. So once again, you can check out our coverage from National Signing Day and all of our analysis going forward. Greg just put up his first edition Inside Nebraska of Greg's Guys, his 5 favorite players from this class. So again, you can check that out, nebraska.rivals.com. Make sure you're liking and subscribing to this video on the Inside Nebraska YouTube channel. And we're going to be back here with more stuff coming down the pike. I know Jay and Steve are getting their film breakdown. We're kind of talking about narratives and overall arching storylines, but those guys are digging into the film to get the goods on, okay, what do these guys bring to the actual field and the new coaching staff. So once again, gonna quit rambling. He is Greg Smith. I'm Zack Carpenter, and we are gonna catch you guys again next time.